I woke up from brain surgery with a thick bandage around my head. The room was quiet. No one was there, not even my daughter. She had told me she couldn't come because of a work trip. I said okay, because really, what choice did I have? But 3 days later, I saw a picture of her at Disney World. She was laughing, wearing Mickey Mouse ears, pushing her mother-in-law in a wheelchair. I didn't cry, I didn't yell, I just sent her a single text. After that, everything between us changed. Before I go on, let me introduce myself. I'm Evelyn Carson, I'm 68 years old, and for most of my life, I've taken pride in doing things on my own. Not because I thought I was super strong, but because I learned early that if I didn't handle things, no one else would. When my husband left and our daughter Rachel was just 9, it was me who kept our home running. I sold my wedding ring to pay for her braces. I worked 2 jobs so she could finish college without drowning in debt, and I never once made her feel guilty about it. To me, love meant showing up, no matter what, not keeping score. But nothing prepared me for the moment the MRI tech pulled me aside. His voice was too calm, his eyes too gentle. He told me they'd found a shadow behind my left eye. Something was wrong. I needed to see a brain surgeon right away. I didn't cry. I didn't even flinch. I just nodded, like he'd told me it might rain tomorrow, and drove home in silence. My hands felt heavy, on the wheel. Everything around me suddenly seemed louder and blurrier. It felt like I was standing at the edge of a dark, deep hole. 2 days later, I sat in a cold doctor's office while a man in a white coat told me the tumor wasn't cancer, but it was pressing on an important nerve. It could cause seizures, memory loss, maybe even a stroke. Surgery was the best option. 6 weeks. That's how long I had. I smiled, thanked him, and went home. Then I just sat there in the dark, thinking, who do I even tell? There was only Rachel. We weren't distant, but we weren't close either. We texted now and then, called on holidays, but there was always this invisible wall, like she was living her life on one side, and I was just peeking through a window. Still, I picked up the phone and called her. I said, I need you. The words felt strange in my mouth. It had been so long since I'd said them to anyone. She didn't hesitate. Of course, she said. She promised to come down from Atlanta, stay the weekend, help me get home after the surgery. I felt a weight lift off my chest. I started getting the house ready, washed the guest bedsheets, made a grocery list with all her favorite snacks, pulled out the soft pink blanket she used to love. Then, 2 weeks before the surgery, she called again. Her voice was too cheerful, like she was pretending everything was fine. I knew something was up. Then she said her husband's company was doing a last-minute retreat in Miami, and all the spouses had to go. It was already paid for. She said she'd come the week after. I sat there, holding the phone, trying to find the words. But all I could say was, okay, I understand, because that's what I've always done. I tried not to make it harder, tried to believe she might still change her mind. But deep down, I already knew she wouldn't come. I wasn't shocked, and maybe that's what hurt the most. So, I packed my hospital bag alone. I asked my neighbor Donna to sign the medical forms as my witness. I didn't let myself get bitter, because I needed every bit of strength to get through the surgery by myself. On the morning of the operation, I woke up before the alarm. Not because I was nervous, but because I'm used to doing hard things. I brushed my teeth, looked in the mirror, and saw a tired woman staring back. But she was ready, because she always had to be. I looked in the mirror that morning and thought, this is the last time I'll look like myself for a while. I knew what was coming, staples in my head, a swollen face, maybe even memories I couldn't trust anymore. When the cab dropped me off at the hospital, the receptionist asked if anyone was with me. I shook my head. No, just me. Her smile faded for a second before she handed me a clipboard and told me to wait. The waiting room smelled like bleach and nerves. I pulled out my phone just to keep from crying. I scrolled through old messages and saw Rachel's name or last text. Let me know how it goes. Love you. No call that morning. No, you got this, Mom. Just a message that felt more like a habit than real care. They wheeled me into the operating room. I stared up at the ceiling, trying to stay calm while the anesthesiologist talked. Then everything went black. I woke up to a storm of sounds, machines beeping, nurses moving around me, my throat aching from the breathing tube. My head throbbed like furniture was being dragged inside my skull. My mouth was dry to speak. But even half awake, I looked around the room, hoping to see someone I knew. Just one familiar face. but all I saw were strangers in scrubs and cold, bright lights. A nurse said, "You're okay." But I wasn't. Not really, because that was the moment it hit me. No one was coming. Not now, not later. That hurt worse than the pain in my head. The surgeon came in and said the tumor was gone. I nodded like I cared. But I wasn't really listening. All I could think about was Rachel. Had she even thought about me? Or was she still pretending to be at that fake retreat? Had she told anyone her mom was in surgery? Or had she already moved on, erased me like a line in a story that didn't matter anymore? 2 days later, they sent me home. Still groggy, still hurting. I had a thick bandage on my head and a pile of papers I couldn't focus on. A hospital car brought me back, and the driver had to help me to the door because my legs almost gave out. Donna, my neighbor, saw me from across the street. She rushed over and helped me inside, asked if I needed anything. I said no, even though I hadn't eaten since the hospital, hadn't showered, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I didn't want her to see how bad things really were. Once I was alone, I propped myself up with pillows, every inch of my body aching. My head was pounding, my stomach was sick. Just to distract myself, I opened Facebook without thinking. And that's when I saw it, like a punch to the chest. A photo Rachel's college friend had posted. Rachel right in the middle, standing in front of Cinderella's castle, wearing pink Mickey Mouse ears and sunglasses. She was smiling so big, I could see the little gap in her front teeth she used to hate. Her husband stood beside her, arms around his mother, who was waving from a Disney scooter like she was queen for the day. The caption read, "Family Magic, 2025, making memories that last forever." I stared at the screen, thinking maybe I was wrong. Maybe I misunderstood. But no, I zoomed in. Rachel looked relaxed, happy, not like someone who had a mom at home, just out of brain surgery, sitting alone in a quiet house full of pills, bandages, and silence. I swiped to the next post, a video. Her husband filming as she helped his mom onto a ride. "Careful, Mama. Hold on tight," she said sweetly. Then a voice in the background said, "You're the best daughter-in-law ever." And that was what broke me. Not the smiles, not the castle, not the churros, but that one word, daughter. Because I was the one who raised her. I was the one who left court with a baby in my arms. The one who skipped meals so she could have new shoes. The one who rubbed her back while she was in labor. And now, here she was feeding churros to someone else's mother. Like the last 30 years were just something she outgrew. I sat there frozen, the phone hot in my hand. And after 20 long minutes, I finally typed one sentence. Not mean, not angry, just sharp and clear. Hope the fireworks were loud enough to drown out the guilt. Then I hit send, closed the app, set the phone on the nightstand, and lay back down, listening to the sound of my heartbeat thudding in my bandaged skull, wondering when I stopped being her mom and started being just another thing she could put off. Less than a minute later, my phone rang. It was Rachel. I didn't even move, just pressed the volume button and watched the call disappear. Then came the voicemail. Against my better judgment, I listened. Her voice was shaky, like she had just realized how bad this looked. "Mom," she said, then a pause long enough that I knew she was trying to come up with a story. "I know how this looks, but it's not what you think." And right there, I felt my jaw clench, because that line always means one thing. What you saw is exactly what happened. You just weren't supposed to see it. She kept talking. Said they were supposed to be in Miami. Yes, but Greg's parents surprised them with Disney tickets. His mom wasn't doing well, and she really wanted the trip. Rachel didn't want to ruin the mood. They were so excited, she said. "I didn't think it would matter if I stayed a few more days. I thought you'd be resting." Greg said, "It'd be fine." I didn't want to let anyone down. And there it was, the real truth, hidden in all her excuses. She didn't want to disappoint them, so she chose to disappoint me again. And the worst part, she said it like it was just a mix-up. Like missing my brain surgery was the same as showing up late to a birthday party. Like it was no big deal. And in that moment, I didn't feel mad. I felt empty. Because once again, she'd picked someone else over me. And she didn't even see what was wrong with that. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she had said. But the truth is she did. Maybe not on purpose, maybe not with fire and shouting, but in that cold, quiet way that stings deeper than anger ever could. The kind of hurt that says, You just weren't worth the hard choice. I played that voicemail over and over in my head until my phone battery finally gave out and the screen went dark. By the next morning, it was full of texts from Rachel, each one shorter, each one more frantic. First, "Are you okay?" Then, "Please just answer." And finally, "Can we talk?" But I didn't reply. Not to be cruel, not to punish her, but because I didn't trust myself not to say something I'd regret. And because, for once, I wanted her to sit in the silence, to feel what it's like to be forgotten, to be an afterthought, to wonder if someone you love even remembers you matter. Later that day, I opened my banking app. There it was, the reminder for the monthly transfer I'd been sending to her. Like clockwork, every month for over a year, my thumb hovered over the button. Then I simply swiped it away. No message, no speech. Just a quiet decision. I'm done being the safety net that only gets noticed when the floor falls out. I thought that would be the end of it. But 2 days later, I got an email, not from Rachel, from Greg. Subject line, "Following up," just 2 lines in the body. "Hi Evelyn, just wanted to check in. Rachel mentioned the usual transfer didn't come through. Everything okay on your end?" I sat there staring at it, my stomach twisting. The way he wrote it, so calm and casual, like he was doing me a favor, like I was the unreliable one. Not a single word about my surgery, not even a fake hope you're healing well. No thank you for the years I'd helped keep them afloat. Just a cold little note asking where the money was. That told me everything I needed to know. Rachel wasn't the only one who saw me as a walking wallet with a pulse, so I didn't respond. I deleted the email, blocked his address. Done. That same evening, Rachel texted again, asking if the transfer had gotten stuck. I finally wrote back with one simple line, "I'm recovering. Please respect that. No money this month." Her reply came within seconds, message after message. About the mortgage, about Mason's school fees, about the braces they'd just ordered. I could feel the panic in her words, like she was trying to find the one sentence that would make me cave. She never asked how my head was, never said, "Are you okay?" Not once. Just line after line about what they needed and how I was being different. And she was right, it was different. Because for decades, I'd been the one who fixed everything, stepped in, smoothed it over. And now, for the first time, I wasn't. And the space I left behind must have felt massive. That night, I turned off my phone, put it face down, lit a small candle by the kitchen window, not for her, not for forgiveness, just to mark the moment. A quiet act of rebellion, a way to say, I'm still here, I matter, even if no one else seemed to remember. Almost 2 weeks passed. I didn't reply to anything, not the texts, not the emails, not even the casual WhatsApp check-ins Rachel liked to send when she was trying to dig without sounding obvious. I thought maybe the silence would teach her something. But people like Greg, people who treat love like an account balance, don't like loose ends when money's involved. And sure enough, on a Thursday afternoon, I heard a knock at the door. Not a gentle one, not neighborly. It was sharp, heavy, confident. The kind of knock someone gives when they believe they deserve to be let in. I stood there, just behind the door, frozen, listening. Then I heard his voice. Calm, familiar, that smooth tone I'd heard too many times before. "Hey Evelyn, it's Greg. Mind letting me in for a second?" And I swear my whole body turned to stone. A cold draft hit me as I stood there, face to face with a man who hadn't even bothered to ask how my brain surgery went, now suddenly showing up at my door like this was some normal neighborly visit. I opened the inside door but kept the screen latched. I stood there, in my robe, the white wrap still covering part of my scalp, still clearly in recovery, and he had the nerve to smile, like we were just old friends catching up after church, like I didn't look like I'd just been through hell, like I owed him a chat. He tilted his head and said, "Rachel's in the car." He nodded behind him. "She didn't want to come in if you're still upset." I looked past him and saw her sitting in the passenger seat, head down, pretending to scroll on her phone. Couldn't even look up, couldn't face me. And that told me everything I needed to know. They'd planned this. She sent him to talk for her, like a buffer, like a shield, so she wouldn't have to deal with the fallout. I didn't say a word, just stared. He shifted his weight, cleared his throat, tried to soften his voice like he was the reasonable one. "Look, I know things got a little messy," he said, like this was about some harmless mix-up, "but this whole freeze-out thing, it's not healthy, Evelyn. It's dramatic. Rachel's been really stressed. Now the mortgage is late. Mason's tuition is due next month. And you cutting us off without even saying anything, it's not like you." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of how ridiculous it was to hear the phrase "cutting us off," like I was some heartless bank shutting down their account, like I hadn't been quietly paying their bills for years, like I hadn't been the ghost in the background, keeping things afloat while they played house and took credit. Still, I said nothing, just folded my arms. And that's when he leaned in a little, dropped his voice like he was about to say something important. And he did, just not in the way he thought. He said, "Let's be honest, Evelyn. You were never part of our long-term plans. Your background, nice when convenient, exhausting when you need things. You're not really her mom anymore, not in the way that counts." I didn't flinch, didn't blink, just looked at him. Because there it was, the truth. Not dressed up, not softened. Just laid out like a knife on the table. He saw me as a burden, a leftover, something they forgot to cancel, but kept getting charged for. And the worst part, I knew those words weren't all his. That last line, "not in the way that counts," had Rachel's fingerprints all over it. They'd talked about this, probably more than once. She'd called me exhausting, said I always needed something. That phrase was too practiced, too sharp to be made up on the spot. I let the silence sit there for a second. Then I nodded once and said, calm and clear, "Thanks, that clears things up." Then I closed the door, slowly, on purpose, locked the screen, and I walked back into my kitchen like I hadn't just been stabbed through the chest, like my heart wasn't burning from a mix of grief, anger, and something else I couldn't even name. I turned on the sink, let the water run, stared out the window and waited. Watched as Greg's car backed out of my driveway. Watched them drive off without even a glance back. And finally, the silence returned. Not lonely this time. Just quiet, heavy, like a blanket I could finally pull over myself. I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out the folder where I kept my will. I opened it slowly, carefully, and crossed Rachel's name off every part of it. Instead, I chose to leave what little I had to a women's shelter, 3 towns away, same one I used to volunteer at before my back started giving me trouble. Then I wrote a letter, just in case something happened to me before I ever got the chance to say it out loud. Nothing long. No drama. Just 5 simple sentences. The truth. I gave you everything I had. I needed you once, and you gave me nothing. That's not a Detitsa decision, and now I'm making mine. I folded it gently and tucked it into the folder. After that, I made myself a cup of tea and stood at the window, looking out at the quiet neighborhood. The porch lights were coming on, one by one. People settling in for the night, and I wondered how many women out there were like me, mothers, grandmothers, and quietly paying for other people's lives just to be included, just to get a birthday invite, just to stay in the loop, just to be needed when it was convenient, never thanked, never truly seen, never put first. And for the first time, I felt something I didn't quite recognize. Frida. It was bitter, unfamiliar, but real. Because once someone tells you you're not part of their plan, you stop begging for a seat at their table. You start building your own. After Greg's visit, the house went quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but that deep, hollow silence that comes from disconnection, from knowing you've finally been cut out. And I didn't try to fill it. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't call anyone. I just let it be, like dust settling in a room no one goes into anymore. At first it felt strange, days passing without a single buzz from my phone, no updates from Rachel, no pictures of Mason meant to soften me, no friendly check-ins pretending not to ask about money. So I adjusted. I started cooking smaller meals, froze the leftovers, walked a little farther each day as the incision healed. The swelling in my face went down, but the ache in my chest didn't, not right away. Because some part of me, some stubborn, mother-shaped part still hoped that maybe she'd come back. That maybe, just maybe, she'd come back different. Or at least honest. But the days turned into weeks, and still nothing. Until one afternoon, Donna, my neighbor, stopped by with a tray of lemon bars. We chatted in the kitchen like we usually did, and then she said it, so casually it almost slipped past me. "I saw your daughter the other day," she said. I raised my eyebrows. My heart jumped, even though I didn't want it to. "She was at the pharmacy," Donna went on. "She looked tired, worn down. I heard Greg's business isn't doing well, and I think they're behind on their mortgage." I nodded slowly, kept my face calm. thanked her for the bars, and when she left, I sat down on the edge of my bed, staring at the closet. Inside were boxes of Rachel's old clothes, still packed, still untouched after all these years. The cracks had started to show, just like I knew they would, because when people build lives on convenience and borrowed time, the walls always start to fall. Sooner or later, the truth gets in. I didn't feel smug. I didn't feel proud. I just felt settled, like someone had handed me a truth I already knew, just in writing this time. Rachel still hadn't texted, not even for my birthday. The day came and went with a voicemail from Mason saying, "Mom says hi," but no call, no voice, no apology. I didn't answer, and instead of curling up in loneliness, I leaned into something else. I joined a widows group that meets every Tuesday at the library. Most of them are in their 70s or 80s. Funny, sharp, no-nonsense women who've lived through heartbreak and still know how to laugh. We drank weak coffee, swapped recipes, shared memories. At first, I only told the light version of my story, but eventually, I told them the truth, the surgery, the silence, the daughter who faded when I needed her most, and not one of them looked surprised. One woman, Clara, just shook her head and said, "It's always the ones we give the most to, who forget us first." And those words stayed with me for days. At first, I kept my distance. I spoke like someone who still had one foot out the door, short answers, light topics. I asked how her work was going. She said it was quiet. I asked if she was sleeping. She said, "Not really." I didn't push. She didn't press. We just, coexisted. She showed up every day around 5, never late. Sometimes we sat in silence with only the hum of the fridge and the ticking wall clock between us. Other days, she'd talk about small things at first. The kind of harmless chatter you give someone when you're testing the water, the weather, the motel coffee, a bad driver on her commute. But sometimes, her voice would drift deeper into things that hurt. Like how Greg used to comment on how often she called me, or how every time she defended me, he'd make her feel like a child who hadn't grown up. I listened, not because I was ready to forgive, but because, for the first time in years, she wasn't hiding behind excuses. She wasn't blaming stress or bad timing. She was just telling the truth. One evening, about 2 weeks in, she brought over a photo album she'd found while packing one I thought had been lost years ago. We sat side by side on the couch, flipping through old birthdays, school plays, messy art projects. There was a picture of her in a Halloween costume I'd sewn by hand at 3 a.m. A lopsided ladybug with one wing falling off. She laughed at it. Really laughed. And for a moment, the years melted away, just for a breath. "I forgot about this," she said softly, touching the edge of the page like it might crumble. "I didn't," I said. "I remember every late night." She looked down then, a quiet apology passing through her without needing words. She didn't move back in, and I didn't ask her to. This wasn't a movie. There was no dramatic music playing, no big speech. Just two women, both hurt, both trying. Some days were better than others. Some days she stayed for 20 minutes. Some days 2 hours. Once, she fell asleep in the armchair, and I covered her with the same pink blanket she used to love as a teenager. She didn't say anything about it the next day, and neither did I. And slowly, something started to shift. Not a full repair, not a return, but something new. A rhythm, a trust, a beginning. Because sometimes, love doesn't come back with fireworks or confessions. Sometimes it returns quietly, with tired eyes and empty mugs, and showing up at 5 every day without being asked. And that, I was learning, might be enough. I was at the grocery store chatting with a kind stranger, and even though they were nice, I kept a bit of distance. Not because I was still angry, but because healing doesn't happen overnight. It wasn't just about hurt feelings. It was about years of being the one who held everything together. Years of mothering someone who needed me, even while quietly resenting the fact that I was always there. That kind of tension doesn't disappear in a week or even a month. Then, one afternoon, Rachel showed up at my door with a bag of groceries. She didn't say anything, just walked in and started putting things away, like it was the most normal thing in the world. I watched her for a while, waiting for the ask, waiting for the favor, but it never came. Eventually, I said, "You don't have to keep showing up like this." She looked at me and said, "I'm not doing it for you." And I believed her. Something in her face had changed, like she'd finally seen what life looked like without a safety net and didn't like what she saw. Slowly, The conversations started to get deeper. Not just updates or apologies. Real talks. Hard talks. The kind we never had when she was younger, because I was too busy making sure she had what she needed, donned. She was too busy pulling away to notice. One night, she told me that Greg used to make fun of me behind my back. Said I was always gloomy, that I used guilt like a weapon. When I didn't say anything, she looked down and whispered. I didn't realize how much of that I started saying, too. I didn't tell her it was okay. It wasn't. But I did say, you're not the first daughter to forget her mother is human, and you won't be the last. She nodded. That was all she needed. A week later, she brought Mason by for an hour, said he wanted to see me. When he hugged me and said, Grandma, you look less sick now. I nearly lost it, not from sadness, but from how open and honest kids can be when no one's feeding them excuses. He asked if we could bake cookies like we used to. So we did. Rachel sat quietly at the table, watching us, her eyes shiny, but no tears, like she was seeing something she never thought she'd get back. Things didn't suddenly get easy, but they got real. Rachel picked up a part-time job at a small clinic. Nothing fancy, but it was steady and honest. She started watching her budget, started saying no to help even when I offered. Not out of pride, but because she wanted to own her choices. When the topic of the will came up, I told her the truth. I changed it. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She just said, I would have too, and that told me everything. The trust wasn't fully rebuilt. Maybe it never would be. But something had shifted. She wasn't trying to slide back into the old routine where I carried everything and she coasted. Then, one morning, she came in holding an envelope. It's from Greg's lawyer, she said quietly. I opened it while she sat across from me, chewing her thumb like she used to as a kid. Divorce papers, signed, final. I didn't smile, didn't say a word, just folded them back up and said, good, because there was nothing else to say about him. By the second month, she'd moved into her own place. A little apartment, nothing fancy, but it was hers. I didn't pay for it, didn't buy the furniture. I just brought takeout and held the door open while she carried her own boxers. I watched her make it feel like home with her hands, not mine. That's when I knew we were standing on new ground. One day she stopped by and asked, can I come visit on Sundays? No pressure, no expectations, just time. I said yes, because this time, I meant it. I wasn't doing it for her anymore. I was doing it for me. For the version of myself that still believed we could build something honest, as long as we both showed up not as roles, but as real people. When people ask me now about Rachel, I don't say we fixed anything. I say, we're learning each other again, like strangers who used to live in the same house, but never really talked. And that's the truth. She's not my little girl anymore, and I'm not just her mother. We're two grown women with scars, stories, and choices we both have to live with. But we're here, we're talking, we're trying, and some days, that feels like a miracle. Some days, it feels like hard work, but both are better than silence. I don't know what the future holds or how much time we'll have, but I know this. I'm not background noise anymore. Not just the emergency fund, not just the extra seat at a holiday table. I'm Evelyn, and for the first time in a very, very long time, I'm not waiting to be chosen. I'm just living, head clear, heart steady, and happy. That's it for today. What would you have done in her place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I love reading what you all think. And hey, if this story touched you, check out these other ones too. You won't want to miss them.